Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Tasha Danvers, who is a two-time Olympian and Olympian medalist. Welcome to the program, Tasha.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Hey, doing really good. So I'm always interested in when I talk to people that come out of the athletic world as well as the military background, there seems to be a common thread, and I hope that we can cover this in the interview, but of this persistence and diligence and overcoming and motivation and all of these things that carry over in business, because there's so many leaders that come out of a structured military background or like in your case, athletics. So give us a little bit of your background and then what led you to become a motivational speaker, and how is your athletics tied into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out quite young, as a youth athlete, and sort of kind of progressed from there. I was eventually recruited to run track for the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, where, I kind of really flourished and went on to attend the 2000 Olympics, become an NCAA champion, and then go on to eventually, in 2008, become an Olympic medalist. And I think over the 20 years that I was an athlete, there are certain things that just became second nature. Like you're surrounded by people that do things in a very particular way. They're consistently training. They're consistently focused on the next goal. They're consistently putting in hard work. They're consistently sacrificing. And so when you're in that circle, and especially me, I started at age 15, I didn't know anything else, which actually was a blessing and a curse, because I didn't realize that wasn't normal for all of society. And then I also didn't realize how it could translate into business later on. It wasn't until much later, and people kept telling me, well, this transfers, that I really started to get it.
Well, it's funny because what you just mentioned made me think of you don't know what you don't know, and you were just kind of too young and too naive to not know these things. So
right.
When did you start realizing some of these life lessons?
Well, there were some things that I learned along the way. So, working hard, never giving up, keeping things in perspective, learning how to fail successfully. All of those types of things, I learned those along the way. But the actual business aspect of what I was, how my sports translated into business, I really didn't learn that until I retired, because it was really like a bubble popped. And this is why I have such a passion for transition, whether it's in, just everyday life, or whether you're a sports person or an entertainer, transitioning from that world into the quote unquote real world. It was really a struggle because there was so much stuff that I didn't understand. And so it wasn't until after that, I was actually applying for a job, and I said to my friend, I have no skills, because I had nothing to write. I spent 20 years as a professional athlete. I didn't, have the job experience section was blank pretty much, And so it wasn't until I was speaking to them, they were like, well, this translates to that, that I really started to appreciate the skills that I had as an athlete that could translate. But I think that, it doesn't just apply to athletes. I feel like if there's anything that you've been good at, you can take those skills and apply them to areas where you want to grow. And so, for example, if you're a good mother, or if you're good at communication, or if you're good at, computers and things like that, what is it about that? How is it that you're good at that? And you pull out what makes you strong at that. Are you doing it consistently? Are you spending a certain amount of hours on it a day? Are you positive in your attitude towards it? And then you take that structure, that framework, and you apply it to areas where you want to grow. It's a bit more challenging, obviously, because you're probably not as passionate in those areas that you're not too keen on, but that really helps.
Let's talk about that one point right there for a second, because I think that is really an unpopular mindset, which is, well, I'm not really good at this thing, so I'm going to focus on this thing. And I think that a lot of people, and you can make the case one way or the other, but if you're not good in one area, let's work on it, bring it up. But I wonder if you, from your background and experience in coaching and speaking and athletics, what if you weren't very good at one sport and your parents were pushing you to be really good at that? You could probably improve incrementally, but your passion and your true ability was in this other one, and that's where you should focus on. So in personal or business or any area of our life, what's the significance of knowing where we really flow and are motivated so that we can focus there, as opposed to really working on something that doesn't get us excited?
Right. Well, I really love when people say, what would you do if, what is the thing that you would do even if you weren't getting paid for? I think that's a great place to start. That's a great place to start in terms of passion. Now, when I speak about working on areas that you're not good at, I would do that under the umbrella of what you're passionate about. So say, for example, I love speaking. Okay, I love to give speeches. I love to inspire people. I don't particularly like the process of coming up with the speech. I don't particularly enjoy the writing part. I love being in front of people. I love making eye contact. I love hearing that something I've said has inspired you to take action. But the actual putting together, sitting down, really having to think and what would inspire, that actual process where I'm just sort of on my own and I don't have the energy of other people to sort of, enthuse me. That is not the most exciting part of the process for me. So when I say, what areas are you weak in? It's not just across the board, any random thing, maybe I'm not a good driver, let me work on that. No, it's under the umbrella of what you're passionate about. Because even under our passions, like especially say, for example, artists. I'm an artist. I do music. So artists, in my experience, tend to be a little bit airy-fairy, right? We're like off in the clouds. We just want to create. We don't want to deal with all the business stuff. And sometimes that hurts us because we're not organized in our, process as far as business is concerned, and making sure that papers are signed and making sure that we put things down on paper when we're making agreements with people. So sometimes we don't pay attention to those details. So under the passion of creating art, if you're not good at admin, that's something that you need to get good at. Does that make sense? So it's like, bring up your strengths that will enhance what you are passionate about. So if you're passionate about running, but hey, you don't like doing weights, find a way to make that enjoyable. Find a way to look at, okay, I love the running part. I don't particularly like lifting weights. How can I bring that? I'm not good at weights. How can I bring that up so that my whole running career can now become enhanced by bringing up that area within the umbrella of my passion?
And make that mental connection between weight and running. So maybe when you're getting ready to work out, you're like, okay, I got to do this, whatever, a core workout or quad leg day. And I don't love leg day because it's so exhausting. But I know that when my legs are stronger, my running stride is whatever. So I think that's a big piece of that, right? Absolutely. Yeah, I don't like doing abs, but I like to look good. So every time I want to avoid doing an abdominal workout, I say to myself, okay, well, you want to look a certain way, so this is what you have to do it. And that's like really a real basic example. Yeah. But yeah, definitely what you were saying is completely true. That putting it in perspective and using it as motivation can be very helpful. And then I always love to talk about other people who have found success through certain techniques. And one of those people is Mel Robbins, and she talks about the 5-second rule. And there's science behind that. And you literally say to yourself, anything that you're having a struggle getting done, you say to yourself, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you just get it done. Because what it does is it interrupts the pattern that your brain already has to protect you. So basically the brain is designed, like, even if it's something that you know is good for you, if it feels
uncomfortable, your brain is going to start to go to work to stop you from doing it. So if you don't do something different within 5 seconds of that starting to happen, or you starting to get that feeling, your brain will go to town to try and say, oh, you don't need to do it today. It's not that big a deal if you miss a day. You know, you're not good at that anyway. It will start to go there, and then you'll fall into the old patterns and the old neural pathways that you've already established. If you can break that cycle by jumping in before your brain can get to go to work on you, then you can start to move in that direction. So I always, encourage people to look at different people who are great in those types of fields. Reading a book like The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins is a great way to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of techniques that you can use to get yourself to the next level. And, in one of my speeches, I talked about not just being a winner amongst ordinary people, but becoming a champion amongst winners. You want to be on the next level in your life. And that's not to compare. That's to look at your life and say, okay, let me get to myself to being a winner. And then how can I fine-tune, that element of me? I'm winning. How can I fine-tune it so I can become a champion?
Yeah, and I think one thing we were mentioning about the noticing what you're passionate about and good at and focusing on, and then maybe tying in something you're not so great at. I think that there's a distinction in let's say your business life. If you're talking to a CEO or an entrepreneur, if there's an area in your business life that you're not wonderful at, you should get outside help that really specializes in that. But I feel like some people go, okay, good, here you go. They hand the baton off to that person, and they turn a blind eye. And I think that there is a possible a detriment in that setup, because you need to be knowledgeable enough with that area that you can follow along with what they're doing so that you can make sure it's right for your business. You don't need to dive in and roll your sleeves up and do it, but you need to at least not turn a blind eye to it. You need to at least know enough about that. So is that something that you find as well in your work?
Absolutely. I truly believe that the best coaches have coaches. And coaches aren't just coaches on the track. Coaches are leaders. Coaches are CEOs. Coaches are anybody who's in a position to influence others. So if you're a CEO, if you're running your own business, if you have employees, if anything, you're a coach. You're showing people how to do things. But if there is an area within that you're not good at, to just delegate it off elsewhere and not really understand what's happening. I made that mistake in my career. I had managers and agents because I was like, okay, well, let me just focus on running. I don't want to learn. And so it hindered my progress as a human being, because when I was done, I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about contracts. And so had I said, okay, you can take care of this, but let me take a look at it. Let me understand why you've made the decision. Let me understand why you made this deal. I would have been a completely different person at the end of my career. So I feel like if you're not learning, you're dead. I feel like you should always be learning. There should always be reading. Now, if you can't afford, say, a coach to work with you on a particular area, or maybe it's not a kind of coaching type of thing, you can use books as a coach. You can use podcasts. You can use interviews like this as a coach. You can find people like remotely, through books, through radio, through the internet. There's so many ways you can learn stuff these days. There's actually no excuse, not necessarily to not do it, but to not understand what's being done even when you delegate.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I mean, we're the information age these days, and I think that too many people don't recognize that. And you ever heard that saying, knowledge is power? And people say, yeah, knowledge is power, but it's really not power. It's potential power, because you have to put it into action. But I remember I love quotes, and what you said there reminded me of one from Jack Welch, and he said, knowledge no longer is power, because everyone has it. Access to knowledge has never been easier or faster. So we need to take advantage of that. And I think that too many times, whether it is that YouTube video or that podcast interview or these books, don't just listen to them or read them just to check the box and say, I did it. Read one page. Listen to one episode and stop. And where can you take notes and implement that? So I think that becomes then a mode of motivation because you're really internalizing that.
Right, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that quote because I always say knowledge is power, but the application of knowledge is wisdom, and we should be shooting for wisdom, right? And so I have a mentor. One of my mentors, Yvonne Brooks. We were working through a book as a group, and she said to us that if we were not asking ourselves a question after every paragraph, we were not reading them. Now that's serious. Like, I mean, it was like
that's pretty tight. Yeah, every paragraph. I can see every chapter, but every paragraph.
Yeah, she said every paragraph, and you don't have to necessarily spend 3 hours pondering this question, but it really made me think because sometimes I would just fly through a book like crazy, but really, what's the value in that if maybe I only grab one point out of it? And I thought to myself, you know what? There's no harm in asking myself a question after every paragraph, that assuming I'm actually sitting down reading the book as opposed to, an audible or something. But every so often, more frequently than not, you should be asking yourself a question about the information that you're receiving because questions are basically how the universe works. And if you are not seeing in your life the results that you want, it's the questions you're asking.
Yeah.
Your questions need to be reframed.
That you mentioned that because I think that too many times we hear leaders or readers, and it's like, okay, let me go read more, and then you just read, and then you're like, what did I just read? Kind of like when you're driving down the road and you get to where you're going and you go, wow, did I go through a stoplight or a stop? I mean, I just got here. I kind of zoned out. Well, I feel that the more you read in the ways that you're mentioning, maybe not every paragraph stopping and asking questions, but good, solid reading, over the years, things get baked in. And I'll give you an example that happened literally just yesterday. I was working with a set of clients, and we had this meeting about this objective we were trying to meet. And the question came up, and they asked me, well, how can we? They go, we need to do this right here. We need to convert this and do this thing, right? And I said, well, that's not possible because of these reasons. And I found myself then continuing on and saying, but let's figure something out. While it's not possible this way, let's ask ourselves, how could it be possible? And then I continued through this conversation and said, we could accomplish close to the same thing by doing it this way and this way and this way. And I said, we need to ask ourselves not how can, or this can't be done, but how could this be done? If it were possible, what were some ways? And my whole point to that is I didn't plan, the thought didn't go off in my head, you must do this and say this, but it just became part of what I was saying because of so many times I've read that and heard that, and you don't take that hurdle as an obstacle, you find a way over, around, under. And so what do you think about kind of immersing yourself in that motivation, personal development, not just, I read my one book for the new year. No, it's got to be constant and never ending.
Yes. I mean, I have to admit, I'm a serial learner, so I'm constantly trying to learn, constantly trying to immerse myself in positivity. But again, like you said, there has to be a balance between immersing yourself in information and actually making the time to apply that. And that's a great example that you use where you're actually applying what it is that you've learned, because questions are so powerful. And I think people underestimate that because it's so natural to say, well, why isn't this working? Or how comes I never get the promotion? Or, why does my boss always bother me? Those aren't questions that are empowering, that are actually going to generate a great energy around what you're trying to do. Those questions that you are, so you're like, okay, you know what? That might not work, but what could work? How could I make my career flourish? What is it I could do to either get promoted or find a job that I'm really passionate about? How could I infuse more life into the career that I'm following? You know, those questions, those are powerful questions, but you got to catch yourself, like you said, when you're asking the wrong questions, because the way our minds work, they're going to go start seeking the answers. So if your question is, why does this never work? Your brain's going to go to work to just keep giving you more answers about why it doesn't work, because it's terrible, because this or that. If you ask, how can I make this work? Now your mind's going to go to work, well, we could do this, we could do this. So yes, questions are incredibly important in creating the environment and life that you want.
Excellent. Well, let's wrap up by talking about your keynote speaking. What are your main topics that you focus on, and what are your main audiences that you deliver your speeches to?
You know, funnily enough, I've talked to every type of audience you could possibly imagine, but my main focus area tends to be around mindset, you know, and how having the right mindset, kind of like the things that we've talked about today, can really impact and influence the way that your life turns out. I also talk about, you know, how to actually take yourself from, you know, one position to another. So say, for example, I took myself from being an athlete into the business world. And there is a process in that transition, because usually we feel less than when we're transitioning, because we got 20 years or 50 years or 40 years in this career. Now we're going off into the unknown, and it's managing that whole transition that is so, it can be really, really difficult for most human beings, because it's so unknown. So I talk about things like that. But like I said, most of my work is based on mindset, helping people have a healthy life, whether it's, you know, from a holistic perspective. So healthy body, healthy mind, healthy finances, you know, healthy spirit, healthy soul, if that's something that you do. And so I work with people in that arena. So I coach people, but I also speak on those topics. It's really helping people live their best life. I truly believe that none of us are supposed to merely exist. We are supposed to live, and live abundantly. I think that society has done us a disservice to get to this position where we sort of think that you're supposed to go to school, get a good degree, grow up, get a good job, have a few kids, get married, blah, 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 and then, you know, after 40 years, maybe go on holiday if you're not sick or tired. That is not how we're meant to live. We're meant to find our passion, investigate that passion, deliver that passion to the world, and that's how we should be living. We should be living excited and enthusiastic about life every single day. And if we're not doing that, it's our job to figure out how to get that done.
I love it. And if we had a microphone, I could drop it right there. That's the perfect spot to drop. So thank you so much, Tasha. And what's the best way that people can reach out and connect with you?
Absolutely. The best way to reach me is on www.tasha360.com. That's TASHA 360.com, and that's a social media and information hub. You can connect to any of my social media from that website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was wonderful getting to know you.
Absolutely. I appreciate and I'm honored that you've asked.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.